Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with your host, Michael Hare. Tune in every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with co-host Gypsy Jules, and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Matt Hoffman as we talk to guests, discuss metal detectors, equipment, and everything treasure related. Feel free to join in the discussion in the chat room during the show, and please, if you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you taking a moment, hit that like button, and share the link with your friends. We hope you enjoy the show. The All Metal Mode podcast starts right now.
Hey everybody, this is Mike here, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode podcast with myself and my co-host tonight, Mr. Matt Hoffman. Don't forget Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can join us. That's myself and Gypsy Rose. So welcome to the show. We have a lot going on tonight, so we're going to try to get to it pretty quick. Before we get started, something I've been seeing a lot of here lately, it's really been in my feed on social media, is shovels. And you know I'm a huge fan of Predator tools. And that's all I use, it's all we use, and we love them. I seen somebody post a shovel made by one of the metal detector manufacturers. And I'm telling you, a lot of them do it, and a lot of them are junk. I've heard of a few of the hand diggers that work okay. This was a full shovel, and I'd never used it. Matter of fact, when I seen it, I thought, wow, that's a sharp-looking shovel. And people's responses were overwhelming. Everybody was talking about how they fold and they break. One guy said that it actually comes with a sticker on it, made in China. And the funny thing was, I'd looked it up, and it was less than $20 than most of your most popular Predator Tools full-size shovels. And I'm going to tell you, Predator Tools, it's George Leshy, his wife, and their son. And that's who builds the shovels. George heat treats every shovel himself, and you get something that'll last forever. And to save $15, $20, I don't care if it's $30, $40. I know that there's a guy out there making these shovels, and they're really sharp looking. And he's here in the United States, but he's using steel instead of chromoly. And I've talked to people that break them. I've talked to people that say they're super heavy. You know, if $20 is that important to you, I guess do it. But I'm telling you, there's something you're going to get buying a Predator Tools shovel or hand digger that you're not going to get anywhere else. You know, it's just a warning. If you're new to the hobby, if you're not aware of Predator Tools, I'm telling you, they're worth it. It's all we use. It's all Matt uses. That's all I will use. Steph uses a Predator Tools shovel when she goes out with us. That's all we'll use. They're hand diggers. They're Model 85. Their Model 75 is incredible. It's a little pricey, but when you know what goes into it, it's all American-made steel, certified American-made steel, and everything is American-made down to the rivets on the sheath. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you pay for what you get. You get what you pay for, and in this case, that's absolutely true. Tonight, Matt and I, boy, do we have a lot going on here. We're going to talk about the Indian Wars. It's actually a battle for Ohio, for Western expansion that happened in the 1790s. And I'm really excited for this. I've done a lot of research in the past. I've actually never hunted any of it, but hopefully I will eventually. My brother actually has some land lined up next time I go to Ohio. Hopefully the fields, a lot of fields around Fort Recovery. And I don't know what was there. I don't know if there was any battles, but we know that they were close to the fort, and there are some house sites on it. So hopefully next time I'm in Ohio, I'll get back to it. Bill says he has a cool story. Bill Marsh in chat says, I have a cool story on that subject, researching a spot for 2 years. Oh, I can't wait to hear that. I hope he'll share it with us. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Oh, not too bad, but it's funny you mentioned, excuse me, it's funny you mentioned digging shovels, because I lost another one last week, the usual for me. I'm usually good to lose about 2 or 3 a year, so I am down to just my big digging shovels, my Piranha, and the one D-handled one that I'm borrowing from you. And I have my, I really can't remember the name of it. It's a really nice shovel. It's that wide, like, fanned out digging shovel. Crap, I can't think of the name of it. But nevertheless, I love that shovel too. It works good. But yeah, I lost another one last week.
How'd you lose
set them
it?
down. I think what happens to me is before I get in my car, I take my digging pouch off and I grab it, and the shovel ends up falling out, and I don't notice. Throw it in the car, leave, and don't realize it's missing until I get either to another place that's nowhere close to where we were at. Or so, yeah, some of these people's houses and farm fields, man, they're acquiring some damn nice equipment here every time I show up, because I tend to lose a lot of stuff. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm one more down. But
which one did you lose?
My Lesh, the 70, not the 70, 80, the standard one,
the 85, the hand digger,
85.
Yeah, a little easier to replace, not so expensive. I think they're about $45.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but when you lose 2 or 3 of them a year, it gets old after a while, and I got to find a better solution. I maybe need to put like a rivet or a hole in that thing and tie a string to it so it can only go so far from my from my belt.
Oh, you're a hot mess, man. You are a hot mess.
Yeah, tell you so.
Bill said you need a shovel tether. Yeah, he needs a personal assistant that just walks around and follows him and picks up all the stuff he drops and misplaces. You know, when he leaves his detector in the garage, you know, they can come back and hang it up in his office. And when he drops shovels and stuff, you had a pretty good hunt the other day.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, overall, I was a little disappointed in the site, but overall, it was not bad. I found a nice early 1900s barber dime. I found a real nice shape 1865, or let me say 1865 Indian, and then true to my word and just magical luck, I guess, I ended up finding a Civil War token that had a hole punched in it. So
do you know how
someone
many,
obviously was carrying it around.
Do you know how many Civil War tokens you found? No?
Probably like 200,000% more than most people find ever.
Right.
I don't know why I find so many of those things, but just dumb luck, I guess, man.
No, it has to be something about Northeast Ohio, because
it's got to be something in this area. But because I mean, I find so many of those that it's ridiculous. But yeah, so anyhow, it was funny because I couldn't really see what was on it, and I said, "Man, I see stars on this thing," and then I said, "Oh, wait a minute, no, it's an Indian," and the guy I was with's like, "Yeah, there's no stars on Indian head pennies." I'm like, "Well, there's a damn Indian on the thing too," and then I'm like, "Oh yeah, Civil War token." I should have figured that.
Now this is one you don't have though, right?
This is one I don't have. Unfortunately, it's not in the best of shape, but I do like it. I find it cool because it did, had a hole punched in it. Someone obviously was carrying it around at some point in time, and it's one I don't have. On the back it says Army and Navy, and I have some that say that on the back, but I didn't up till now have any of the ones that had any of the Indian heads on the front. So yeah, I was pretty happy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know if you noticed, and the listeners too. I think I mentioned it last week. Brian Harvey found a bullet that it appears to have collided with another bullet, a Civil War III ringer. He posted it in all metal mode this week. So if you get a chance, go out to all metal mode and check it out. Very cool. That's unique. And he puts a bullet like up against where it hit, like where he thinks it hit, to show you, but they're not fused together or anything. But boy, it sure matches awful good, doesn't it?
I'd be shocked if that's not exactly what happened to that thing. I mean, it is a perfect fit. It looks like a bullet just smacked that thing right in midair.
Right.
I'd imagine that's had to be what happened to it, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So tonight we're talking about the Indian Wars of like the 1790s, I think. I think it was like 1790 1795, if I remember correctly. Matt Anthony Wayne finally won a decisive battle at the decisive. What am I trying to say, Matt? Decisive victory at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. We'll get into that. It's really amazing. A lot of forts were put up, a lot of little depots, little storage, and we're going to get into all that. So let's start with Josiah Hammar. He was a brigadier general, and he was the first one to take on the Indians during the war. He was, I believe, in the Revolutionary War as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. That's correct.
Yeah, and
now I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say he marched from Fort Washington. I believe it was 1790. 320 regular soldiers and 1,100 militiamen, highly untrained. Some of them didn't know how to load a musket, it said. Some of them didn't even have guns. And I remember reading a long time ago that a lot of them, I'm not sure if it was, I believe it was with when Josiah Hammar marched up into Ohio, there were families along. Some of the soldiers brought their families and stuff, but poorly trained. They ended up around Fort Wayne, Indiana. He went through. He burned a bunch of Indian villages. The Indians fled. The Indians regrouped and attacked Hammar's men. Colonel Hardin, one of Hammar's men, split off with a few hundred militiamen, and he was ambushed. Almost right away, the regular soldiers were killed, and it was just it was a huge victory for the Indians.
Well, and Mike, the unfortunate thing about that is that, despite the fact that they had some trained, militiamen and some true soldiers there, they were destined to fail. They were just so outnumbered with experience from the Indians that that there was no way that battle was ever going to really become victorious for them, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, it was a downright utter failure for them.
Mm-hmm. They had I lost my train of thought here. I'm trying to get it back. He ended up, him and his men retreating back to Fort Washington, which was in Cincinnati. He'd lost roughly 180 men, killed or missing, and the battle was known as Hammar's defeat. The battle was on the northeast side of where Maumee, St. Mary's, and St. Joseph's River come together in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Really easy to find. Unfortunately, it's all houses now today, but I would bet you could creep around if it's not off limits. Probably get permission. I would take a chance and get permission in some of those yards. You never know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go door knock in a lot of those areas. Guarantee you can pull up all kinds of cool stuff that people don't even really realize the history of that area, or B, we're never going to detect it and still haven't. I guarantee there's a bunch of cool stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And in the water, I wouldn't be surprised if there's stuff in the water right there.
Oh yeah, Oh, no doubt.
Boy, there's a lot of information. Let me see. Bill's saying, was that the battle where the supply train never came?
No, not to my knowledge, but I believe more the issue with that whole battle was, they literally tried to go in, just blazing some bayonets in. They were just outnumbered because these guys had no clue what they were doing. In fact, Little Turtle, one of the Indian chiefs that was in that battle, they ended up basically circling around and ambushing these guys, as they pushed forward one more time to try and get into the, to take that over, and they basically didn't stand a chance. It was just a disaster for them, absolute disaster for the Americans, and against the Indians in that battle.
I think at this time there weren't many forts set up or anything. I'm not sure. I know more forts came along, but we'll get into all of that. He, of course, Josiah Marla lost his. I think he was even court-martialed, if I remember correctly, and he was relieved of duty, but he was not found guilty. Then Arthur St. Clair took over, and it's interesting to know, and actually I learned this from Greg Shipley when we had him on the podcast. I'm not sure if this is true with Hammar and St. Clair, but I know when Wayne took over the Army, the whole U.S. Army was in Ohio, which, if you think about, is pretty crazy. And I think that explains how important this was. This wasn't just fighting the Indians; it was fighting the British. I mean, a lot of this leads up to the War of 1812. The British were still mad that they hadn't won the war. They didn't want to give the United States up. And so they were working with the Indians. They were pushing the Indians, saying, "Hey, if you beat the Americans, we'll treat you better." Pretty much is what happened. In November of 1791, St. Clair's forces camped on a high hill near the present-day location of Fort Recovery, Ohio, near the headwaters of the Wabash River. About 1,000 Indians led by Little Turtle again and Blue Jacket, which, if you've ever read about Blue Jacket's really interesting. The book, The Frontiersman by Alan Eckert, talks about how, in his book, and the Indians disagree, there's been a lot of controversy, say that Blue Jacket was a white man. Well, he was a white kid taken by the Indians. If you know much about this time, the Indians would raid and kill, and they would take kids and women, even men. Men had to run the gauntlet, which was Indians lined up, hitting them with clubs and everything else. I mean, even the kids and the old people of the tribe. And a lot of people didn't make it. They didn't make it through. You had to be tough to survive that gauntlet, and many didn't. But if you were going to be accepted into the tribe as a male, if they were going to take you in, they would about kill you first. Now the kids and the women, obviously not. But Blue Jacket, they in Alan Eckert's book says that he was a white kid that was taken at a young age. So Little Turtle attacked the militia, who fled across the stream without their weapons. There was battle lines formed, the natives forcing them back. Little Turtle flanked the regulars. St. Clair's artillery was stationed on a nearby bluff and were killed by native marksmen before they even really got started. Colonel William Dark ordered his battalion to fix bayonets, charge the main position. Little Turtle retreated, but ended up circling Dark's battalion and destroying it. Eventually, the U.S. forces just collapsed in disorder. It turned into a nightmare. And they ended up fleeing. They pretty much just got destroyed. They fled for Fort Jefferson. They were pursued by the Indians for a few miles. They left before the fight. They'd set up a camp with and during the battle, wounded and supplies and all that, and they left it. They just took off running, and it was said for days there were execution fires, which you can imagine what execution fires were. I mean, can you imagine being wounded in battle and watching your fellow man run off and leaving you there with the Indians? They were brutal. I mean, both sides were brutal. I've read of stories where Indians removing intestines, tying them to a tree, and then taking hot pokers and stabbing whites in the rear and genitals, making them crawl around the tree until their intestines fell out and stuff. So you can imagine what went on there.
Yeah, they were pretty much lawless. There was no law and order in these type of fights, especially from the Indian side. I mean, they did what they wanted, and that was it. I mean, they left nothing to the imagination of. You can almost imagine if you were captured or injured and they caught up with you, you're dead. I mean, that's it, and they're going to do some brutal stuff to you, which understandably, from their point, they're fighting for their stance and position and for their property and freedom as well. However, St. Clair, both Josiah and St. Clair were, not even so much outnumbered. They were just outmaneuvered and outsmarted in both these accounts.
Yeah, real quick, before we move on, Bill's in the chat giving out some really good information, and I want to talk about it a little bit. He said the British were supplying guns and ammo and paying for American scalps. Absolutely. That was a big part that fueled it. Blue Jacket was an American boy adopted into the Shawnee. There are accounts of that, but the Indians deny that 100%. There's been a lot of controversy to that. If you read The Frontiersman, that's the story. But, it is definitely debatable. Sam Kenton ran 9 gauntlets. Yeah, he was. If you read The Frontiersman, what I took away from that is Sam Kenton was a tough guy. In the book, it talks about how if small parties of Indians would come across Kenton, like say less than 10, they would hide and run. They were scared of him. Now, the book portrays Kenton as a nice guy. He didn't have a problem with the Indians, but they were scared of him. But yeah, he ran like 9 gauntlets. He got his head caved in. He took off, and supposedly the story is he ran through the gauntlet and just kept running. And Blue Jacket was coming into town, or coming into the village, I believe from a hunting party, and bashed his head in. Some of the Indians liked him and kind of saved his life, while others hated him. Yeah, Bill said he just got done with The Frontiersman. Amazing book. It is not about, it is absolutely not about what we're talking about tonight, but it is talking about the beginnings of Kentucky and Ohio, the earliest settlements and stuff, and a lot about Samuel Kenton, and there's a little bit about Blue Jacket in there, a lot about Tecumseh. Very interesting. He's touching on some really good stuff. So Matt Anthony Wayne then takes over. 1792, he's appointed by George Washington to be the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army. Again, they'd lost battles with Josiah Hammar and Arthur St Clair. I mean, huge battle. I mean, just pummeled. And, to get back on that before we continue, I think part of it was, I think a couple things, much like, who was defeated? Shoot. Oh my goodness. These were big defeats like, I'm just, I can't think. Who was defeated out west in like the 1790s? The huge, Custer. I think much like Custer, which is much later, I think they went in and they looked at these Indians as untrained, as savages. That was a lot of the Americans thought then. And I think they went in there with, during the Revolutionary War, you stood and faced each other and fought. And although we were getting out of that somewhat and had to win, I think, they thought they were going to go in there and it was like like you'd fight the British. It was a gentleman's war. The Indians, they didn't do that. They hid behind trees and everything else. And I think these guys just didn't have a clue. I mean, I really do. I think they just didn't have a clue of what they were in store for, what was in store for them. He was...
And let me back up to, even before, as you start to get into Matt Anthony Wayne, one of the questions, right off the bat is why was he Matt Anthony Wayne? But, prior to that, I just want to throw out a few things. Back in 1775, he raised a militia out in Philadelphia and then was basically... He was crazy. Let's just say he was very not afraid to try and do things and everything else, which led him to be appointed into trying to take over basically an impenetrable fort, so called, out at the Battle of Stony Point. And with that, his militia went in there and just decimated these British and took control of the people in that whole fort in I'll call it a fort, but for that battle in 30 minutes, and they captured 472 British prisoners. So, unlike the Indians, they didn't just kill everybody. They, captured and played by some rules. They only lost 18 men in that. So that really, gained Anthony Wayne's notoriety with a lot of people and really drew attention to, what kind of leader he was and what he was capable of doing. Which was, once again, well before, going into well before, both St. Clair and Josiah had just failed miserably with their attacks against the Indians. Now, and more importantly, what should be remembered, the same thing I think Bill brought up, was that the British and the Indians, they really supplied a lot of guns and ammunition, or a lot of anything they could to the Indians to really stop the Americans, because in their minds they're basically losing out too if the Indians lose. So it was a win-win for them to team up with the Indians, and that was something that made it much more difficult, I think, coming with them first two defeats. Hello, Mike.
Yeah. Did you not get my text? You didn't look at my text. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I had to step out for a second. I apologize.
Oh.
Yeah, I sent you a text.
Sorry. Well, I'm sorry. I had my phone was on mute, so in case it rang, I'm sorry. So, okay. So anyhow, so yeah. So yeah.
Sorry about that.
Like I said, no, that's all right. So, but I was thinking, well, man, where'd he go? But yeah, so, there was a lot, as Anthony Wayne grew up, his initial, desire wasn't to be a war leader or anything like that. He worked he did go to college. He worked in his taxidermy business, and as in tannery, better yet, not taxidermy. Let me rephrase my words.
I'm like, what the heck is he talking about?
He wasn't out there doing taxidermy on fish that people brought in. Yeah, I meant to say tannery.
I was going to let it go. And see if you caught yourself.
Holy Moses! Yeah, no, definitely. So, but so it was with that battle at Stony Point that really set off his career in the faith in him as a leader from Washington himself. So that I think is a key factor and something that came about. And prior to that battle, he himself had lost. There was a battle at I think it was Paoli, if I'm not mistaken, and they got beat up pretty bad, and and unfortunately, not only the British / Indians, and once again, they did what they wanted, and they really destroyed very harshly any of the Americans. And then come at the Battle of Stony Point, one of the things that people realize is he took 400 some prisoners. He didn't take revenge and just kill them all. He was very civil in his way that he approached and controlled the militia group and took over that battle. So people saw a different side of someone who was very fair, and they put a lot of faith in what he could do.
One of the things they called him Man Anthony Wayne, and there are conflicting reports. And I would like to think that they call it, one of the reasons they say is because of his tactical skills and his courage in the field. There's stories of horses being shot out from under him and everything else, and jumping on another horse and being involved in the battles and stuff. But then there's another side that says, he was crazy, mad. He got it from being really harsh on the troops and stuff. But then, the counter of that is, there are stories, and we're going to get into that, of hanging of men, of his troops and stuff, that he was in command of. But, then I've also read historical accounts where they all were that way. That's how it was back then. If you messed up, you got hung. You had to, depending on the crime, I mean, they were punished. But, from everything I've read, I believe he earned it, for in a positive way for his tactical skill and his courage. That's my belief.
I agree.
I've read, there were firsthand accounts that from his men that loved him, thought he was a great leader and stuff. But, he was appointed in 1792 by Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. forces, the U.S. Army. Said all that. Something that I didn't know until researching this, he trained his men, his army, for 2 years before going north, before going up into Ohio. And that was his main objective. He won the decisive battle. Battle of Fallen Timber, and I'm trying to think where that's at. It's up by
it's up near
Toledo.
Toledo.
Yeah, he'd won, and the reason it was called the Battle of Fallen Timbers, a tornado had just recently come through there and took out a bunch of trees. So I found that really interesting. How ironic that would be the battleground.
And the Battle of Fallen Timbers is, in at least my mind, a really key and pivotal point where they came in, they took out the Indians, and the Indians said, "All right, we're moving out. We get it. We lost." And that to me says that not only once again did he prevail, but that really furthered westward expansion in areas and territories that were previously still under control of not only some British but the large different tribes, Indian tribes, and that really got them thrown out.
After the battle, he chased the Indians up to, I believe it was Fort Miami that was controlled by the British. And he backed down. Not so much backed down. He backed down. He left his men. He'd won the battle and stuff. But I wonder, as I was researching this, first off, think about how brave that was to go right up to Fort Miami.
And not only that, but what's kind of ironic and actually kind of funny to me in the whole thing is that these British were backing the Indians this whole time, and he beat up these Indians so bad they retreated, went up to Fort Miami. And the British basically locked the doors on him and said, "Nah, you're not coming in. We're no longer. We're not helping you out no more. We don't want to start a war with these American guys. You guys are out. You're on your own." And it's quite funny that that they really just turned on him straight. They knew they didn't stand a chance, and helping the Indians out wasn't going to help their cause. So they just said, "Forget it."
There's times when I read about history that I think, what if this would have happened? What would have been the outcome? Because
crazy.
If he would have, if there would have been the Battle of Fort Miami's, and Wayne win, would have it been the War of 1795 instead of the War of 1812?
Yeah, that's what's so interesting when you think about that.
If he would have, if he wouldn't have pursued the Indians, and then they get up to Fort Miami's, and if they'd have been welcomed in, would have the fight continued with the Indians because they still thought that the British had their back? But I mean, I'm guessing going at the gates of Fort Miami's, and the British are like, "We ain't letting you in." I'm sure that the Indians then are like, "What are we doing? Why are we fighting for these people?" I think that was, just to me, that's so interesting. What could have happened? What could have been, one of those stories? I found that really, just really interesting. The Battle of Fallen Timbers was thought to be on the floodplain on the banks of the Maumee River. Dr. Michael Pratt, an anthropologist and faculty member at Heidelberg University, Ohio, believed the battlefield was a quarter mile above the floodplain. And how he come to that was there was a ravine on the map, one of the earliest maps of the battles, and so he thought it was a quarter mile away, up higher ground. The city of Toledo owns the area. They refused archaeological exploration until 1995, and then in 2001 they allowed it. Pratt was able to conduct archaeological surveys, which relied primarily on metal detectors, which revealed musket balls, pieces of muskets, uniform buttons, and bayonets, confirming that there was a major battle there. So that's interesting. And the reason that was so important to me, and I had to put that on the show tonight, 2001, that's very modern times. And they still, this huge battle, this instrumental, that played such an important part in our history, they didn't know where it was. And what I'm getting at, some of these less known forts that we're going to talk about, and some of these these other things, I'm telling you, there's still a lot of unknown out there when it comes to this, and there's still a ton to be learned. There could be a lot of opportunities for us detectorists, without a doubt. And I'm sure it would take some research. But to have some of this history, I'll say this, all my years, 20 plus years, and I've been on the internet for 20 years. And I'm sure there's more, but, what is amazing to me in those 20 plus years, I think I've seen 4 frogleg buttons found. That's what the military was wearing then. Very unique. They weren't being used very long. And now, of course, what's his name? I forgot. Greg Shipley. Greg Shipley has something like 170 of them he's dug up over the years, which is incredible. But what I'm saying is there's so much history involved with this, and so much it's not known. I mean, if you could find the routes, they had to camp. I mean, can you imagine when they were first establishing these forts and stuff? Of course, there were camps set up. There had to be camps set up in between the forts and stuff. There's so much to be learned yet, and so many opportunities still available. I mean, without a doubt. In 2001, they still, up into the 1990s, they were not sure where the Battle of Fallen Timbers were, where it actually took place. So, you know what I mean? Barb in the chat asked 170, I think it was somewhere around 170 frogleg buttons. It's what the military wore, and I believe it was the first military design of the U.S. Army. And that's what Matt Anthony Wayne's men had, were frogleg buttons. They're very rare. Like I said, I think in all my years, and I'm sure that there's more, but what I have personally come across, I think I've seen 4 frogleg buttons posted on social media and different metal detecting forums, other than Mr. Greg Shipley, which we know is just an amazing detectorist, amateur archaeologist, has something like 170. Barba, if you don't know, if you've never looked, go on Facebook and look him up, Greg Shipley. Man, does that guy have a collection of stuff. Do they taste like chicken? Ken Guthrie says, do they taste like chicken? Probably. I'm not sure. They're a really cool button design. If you look them up, they're called, they're often referred as frogleg buttons. Hey, Ken, we're going to take a little break here and talk with Ken in chat. So, we've talked about doing shirts, and I said I'd get back with you in a couple weeks. Mr. Matt Hoffman still hasn't done the design, so you need to help me beat up on this guy till he gets the design done so we can get our shirts up and going. Yeah, there you go, Matt. Put you on the spot. Let's get busy, man.
That is true. No, I know. I did the one logo, and then I'll make it sweet and short. A program I had on my computer, which cost $600, I no longer have, and that's been kind of bumming me out because I don't have a serial key for that any longer, and I just don't think whatever I come out with is going to look as sweet as what I had envisioned in my head. And that's what's been bothering me. So, but yes, I'll get back on that, and I'll get something out by the end of the week.
Are you in chat, Matt?
I am not right now.
Yeah. Well, Ken says enough excuses. He's like, "Come on, Matt." He said, "Quit making excuses. Get off your butt. Get it." He's trash. No, he's not. He's not Jewish. We'll get it to you eventually, Ken. Yeah, we want to get some shirts made up. I know I want a hoodie and a couple shirts, but, maybe next year, Ken. Maybe next year, because
No. Listen.
This is where Matt needs a personal assistant, man. This guy is a fart in a skillet. He's all over the place. Oh, he's a hot mess. He's just,
I truly, I have been really busy at work. That's been taking a lot of my time, obviously. But I will get it together, and I will have something over to you by Sunday night, Mike.
Okay.
And you're going to be like, wow, I don't believe it.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But he did the first design for the front. It's really good. So I don't know why you're complaining like you can't do the back. Come on, man. I'm going to call your wife and tell her you ain't allowed metal detect until you get our logos done.
Well, she'd probably break my computer just so I couldn't get it done then.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be that's a win-win for her.
Oh, Ken said something just great. Excuses are the nails that build the house of failure. I like that. I like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get back on it. So let's get into the forts. Let's talk about the forts. Fort Washington was in Cincinnati. I didn't really research where that was at. I am guessing that is under city, would be my guess. But that was the staging ground. That was the main fort. That's where, St Clair and Hammar retreated to after the battles. Go ahead. What was you going to say, Matt?
I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, that must be on my side. It sounded like you started to say something. Fort Hamilton, that was the first one in Ohio Territory. It was built in 1791, located in the current city of Hamilton, Ohio. There's a small log cabin in a park that is believed to mark where the fort was located. Again, believed to mark.
That's what's amazing to me. They don't know, for 100% certainty exactly where some of this stuff went down or was at, and it's amazing in some of those areas. I can only imagine some of the stuff you might find, in people's backyards that would have no clue about that.
Well, let me say this. I want everybody to keep in mind as we do this show. This was 70 years, give or take a few years, before the Civil War. Years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a detectorist metal detecting across from a federal Civil War park, where this battle was believed to have happened. And he's in the field across the street finding all kinds of stuff. We'll come to find out through him and then archaeologists, that's where the battle took place. So where this park was at, there was never a battle there. And that is 70 years later, and they got it wrong. So what I'm saying is, I would not take any of this as that's where it's at. If you were going to set out and metal detect any of this, I would research it, try to get a good idea, and then go from there, because there's really good chance that a lot of this is wrong. Again, the most pivotal battle in Ohio during this war, they just, confirmed it, less than 20 years ago?
Less than 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And prior to that, they thought it was a quarter mile away. So then we've got Fort Jefferson, which was in Darke County. Governor Arthur St. Clair built it in 1791. It was an advance post for his campaign against the Indians. It was a square of approximately 100 feet on each side. The fort was built of wood. It was mostly designed as a supply depot. They wanted to get supplies up into Ohio because, I mean, their ultimate goal was to get up north, get up towards Toledo and stuff. So they had to set up supply, where they could deposit supplies. It was originally named Fort Deposit. Before St. Clair's army departed the fort, a court-martial was conducted for an unknown crime. 3 soldiers were convicted and hanged and became the first whites to be executed in present-day Darke County. I found that very interesting. I would love to know what they were court-martialed on. Fort Jefferson became the fallback point for the survivors of St. Clair's army after being attacked on the morning of November 4th, 1791. The following year, as some soldiers were gathering hay outside of the fort, Native Americans attacked the men and killed 15 of the soldiers. Over the next 2 years, there were sporadic attacks against the fort. That's really interesting to know. I've driven by there, Fort Jefferson, and it's they have like I don't know if it's the whole fort, but there's definitely some buildings and stuff depicting what it would have looked like back then and stuff. But there's a lot of farmland around there and stuff too. That's pretty far out away from town and stuff. So that's really interesting. And Fort St. Clair, that was the next one on our list. Following St. Clair's defeat in November 1791, the Army retreated to Fort Jefferson, then Fort Hamilton, and finally Fort Washington. General St. Clair departed for Philadelphia in 1792. Lieutenant Colonel James Wilkinson assumed command of the United States forces at Fort Washington and Cincinnati. Wilkinson noted that it took 2 days to travel from Fort Hamilton to Fort Jefferson, which contributed to the suffering of the wounded who could not leave Fort Jefferson following St. Clair's defeat. Wilkinson ordered the construction of Fort St. Clair between the other 2 forts. So that's really interesting. So that tells me, I doubt that they traveled 2 days straight. There's a camp, right? There's a campsite of a few hundred men. How would you like to come across that, Matt?
Yeah, that'd be super awesome. And that's one of the things, obviously, as they travel from fort to fort and to place, they obviously stopped and camped. And, undoubtedly there's tons of relics and stuff left behind when you got, your soldiers camping anywhere and moving from fort to fort. And, that's what's so amazing is, if you knew some of those routes to go through some of those areas, and a lot of those areas, maybe they have some of the forts and stuff preserved and some of the remains of that stuff, but there's so much more than that going through those likely trails and areas where they went. That's private properties that potentially you get in the right spots, get permissions, and you may come up with some really cool stuff.
Now, something else, a little bit. I mean, it's on the topic, but it's a little bit off of where we're heading, talking about the forts and stuff. I've metal detected in what is I wouldn't even say it's a town. It's a group of houses and stuff, and it's, the story is, now this is almost an hour east of like Greenville, Ohio. Okay, where they were headed up towards Greenville. They were on the far west of the state. And this is more, not central, but it's definitely an hour east, roughly an hour. And this town, there's no stoplight, there's no stores. You drive through it and there's probably 15 houses, 20 houses, a church, stuff like that. And the story of this town, and I don't really know, I haven't researched it in depth of how it came about, but I'm guessing on some of the traveling back Wayne's men and stuff to Cincinnati, because it is a straight shot to Cincinnati. But the reason it became a town, the earliest settlers came there, and it was already cleared out from Mad Anthony Wayne's men. They camped there, and they'd cut down a lot of the trees and stuff to camp there. So they were all over, and there is so much history you're not going to find online, and there's going to be obscure stuff, because you're not going to find out about this. I mean, this isn't something you're going to find out about. I read it in a book that's how this town was formed. Now, unfortunately, I did hunt one place there. I did find one really old musket ball, covered in white. Was it from him? No clue. Or his men? No clue. But still very interesting. Very interesting to wonder. I hope to get in. Actually, I've hunted two places in that town. Didn't find anything like that at that place. I think I found a couple Wheaties at the other place. But so his men were all over the western part of Ohio and up north, and we'll get into some more of that as we go. So then you've got Fort Greenville. Now, this was a very, very instrumental fort. It had fortification positions. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Mad Anthony Wayne had it built. But later, a lot of the city was laid out for, like, the streets and stuff were from when it was Fort Greenville. And it's actually marked, if you go to Greenville, where the fort laid. You can actually follow it around on the streets and stuff, and they're marked of where the actual fort laid. Where was I at? There were blockhouses were built in the central wall. Man, I am having trouble tonight, Matt. I am having trouble. The reason I left, I had to go get water. My mouth was so dry, I was having trouble talking, man. But it was a huge fort. It was very important. It was very busy. It was constructed again in 1793 as the winter quarters for Mad Anthony Wayne's forces. 6 miles beyond Fort Jefferson. You really don't need to know that, because you can go to Greenville and actually see where the fort was. Here's what Bill was talking about. This location was about 6 miles beyond Fort Jefferson, and as he was advancing, word came that a supply convoy had been attacked following the main force. Deciding that since winter was approaching, and this particular site where St. Clair had camped earlier, it offered everything he thought important: water, elevated position, clear field of fire, and plenty of nearby timber. The outer perimeter of the camp was completed on November 21st, 1793. So very interesting. I didn't get much into that. I wonder if Bill... Let me. Bill, you said you had a story about this. Do you mind sharing with us? If not, I understand. I'd be real curious what you were talking about, but I did not get into that supply train getting attacked. When we talk train of wagons, but boy, that would be interesting. There you go. That'd be some great research. Greenville was abandoned in 1796. Was reoccupied in 1805 by Tecumseh and his brother, the Prophet. Now, I want to talk about that because this is so confusing to me. And Bill said he just read the book, The Frontiersman. In The Frontiersman, it is said that Tecumseh died at the Battle of Fallen Timber. So how could he have, which was before 1805, so how could have Tecumseh and his brother, the Prophet, come back and occupy that? I am really confused on that, but that's what I came up with, and that leads to a lot of questions. And then it goes in more detail. Governor Thomas Worthington came to the camp to talk with Tecumseh and went back to Chillicothe so Tecumseh could address the Ohio legislature. William Henry Harrison met the Native American representatives at Greenville in 1814 to discuss peace terms. So I am so confused by all that, but that's where my research led me. I don't know. So why in the book, The Frontiersman, did he die prior to 1805? I don't know, but I've got to believe this account. I'm sure it was a big deal that Governor Thomas Worthington came up and talked to Tecumseh. I'm sure that is much more, documented history. So I'm really, really confused by that. Bill said his brother, the prophet, lived 105 years old. Yeah, I knew he lived old. I wasn't sure it was that old, but yeah, this says Tecumseh. Tecumseh was there in 1805, so I don't know about that. That's really something that would have to be researched out more. Then we've got Fort Recovery, which is very interesting. In December of 1793, General Wayne sent an artillery unit and 8th Infantry, eight infantry companies to the site where Major General St Clair was defeated. Here they would build a fort on the former battlefield. The battle, known by various names such as St Clair's defeat, Little Turtle's victory, and the Battle of Wabash.
Mike, I think important real quick, let me say that Fort Recovery is currently, where that was at is roughly 23 miles from from Greenville and Fort Greenville, and that's a good distance. So once again, here you've got people moving in from different areas and coming up to where they built that fort, and there's got to be literally tons of places that these guys camped on the way to get there. And
not only camped, I bet little depots were set up that were never really.
I'm sure of it.
And that are just lost to history. Here's a good story. Now, man, I've got so much stuff, and I am not good at details, and I forget as much as I would ever know. I think in I don't want to give away the county because I hunt it. There was supposedly 12 blockhouses during the War of 1812. They built these blockhouses as places where if the British did come down, they were worried about the British coming down from Canada. So they built these blockhouses. It was places you could gather, you could fight the British. You could, they were small, what am I trying to say? Not forts, but they were, where they stored ammunition and stuff to fight the British if they come down from the north. So this county, there's 12 of them that in history that they knew of. They knew where 2 of them were, okay, in this county. I sold 2 guys metal detectors, showed them some stuff overlaid, and one of the first places they went was on a later map, but later talking to a local historian and stuff, they believe it was one of those blockhouses because they found OVM buckles, they found all kinds of military stuff, early coins. You talk about an incredible first field hunt. Like you're never gonna find that again, So really interesting. So keep that in mind. A lot of this stuff is lost to history, and there's no doubt in my mind that as we go over these forts and stuff, these are the known forts, and these are the known depots and stuff, because you're right, there had to be more in there. Absolutely. And this is really interesting. Getting into the Battle of the Wabash. Again, Little Turtle was the leader for the Indians. This happened November 1791. 1,400 regular military, and militia, and camp followers, which included both women and children. At the time, the Indians, it estimated there were 1,500 Indians, so very similar in size. St Clair had a battery of artillery. The position of the artillery pieces, they provided no superiority. They were repeatedly fired. They did no damage whatsoever because of the elevations. The smoke resulting from the cannon fire provided excellent cover for the Native Americans. So you can bet that there's cannonballs even to be found. Think about that. That's just incredible to me. During the fight, 900 Americans were killed with 350 wounded. That is a huge, huge number. It is suggested that as few as 30 Indians were killed. 2 years later, Anthony Wayne arrived with the new army, well-trained, well-outfitted soldiers. Understanding the importance of this site, Wayne ordered a fortification built. He intended to use it as a staging area for his assault against the Ohio natives in the spring of '94. He named the stockade Fort Recovery. During the winter, Wayne's men completed the fortification. He began receiving additional men and supplies from Fort Washington. I love Fort Recovery, that name. Think about that. This is where St. Clair just got his butt handed to him. 900 killed, 350 wounded, and he's naming it Recovery. Let that sink in a second, man. That sent chills down my back. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool because once again, you've got a guy that in the past has shown that he can be a true leader, and he truly believes in their mission of taking over or to recover any, basically move out the Indians, and so that it's amazing. And like I said, I'm still blown at some of these distances between the camps of the known or of the known forts, better yet, are just so huge. Okay, so 23 miles between Fort Greenville and Fort Recovery. That was a half-hour drive maybe today, but in the 1790s, wow, they had to have stuff all over the place. Where that just blows my mind. There's got to be so much stuff out there that I never even realized a lot of this. On the western part of Ohio really ever went down, and I think a lot of people would, imagine, they got all this history documented and they know where all this stuff's at, but that's not really the case. There's a lot of stuff that just they don't know.
Yeah. Again, 2,000 Native Americans. Little Turtle had 2,000 Native Americans, and came to fight General Wayne. He was confident of a win. He had more men. These were proven warriors, but Little Turtle had to withdraw his warriors and retreat north. General Wayne assembled his forces and followed Little Turtle and his large coalition. Now, I think that's pretty. I hate to use the word. I've got a word for it, but it's not really a good word. Pretty gutsy move. Let's go with that. General Wayne to leave the fort to chase down Little Turtle and his 2,000 men, and that's what became known as the Battle of Fallen Timbers. So and that was almost 2 months later. Fort Recovery seen a lot of action. There's literally a battle on top of a battle there, and that's pretty interesting. I bet that's.
And if you look at that area today on Google Maps, in basically there's obviously stuff that's been preserved, but you have
houses and a bunch of houses, basically. I can imagine that you could probably find stuff on a lot of those properties, assuming that they hadn't been detected, that still exist today, that's just still sitting out in these people's yards. And yeah, that's always amazing to me.
Yeah. Next, Fort Adams. It was a small star-shaped fort with 2 blockhouses at opposite corners. It was constructed as part of Wayne's campaign north from Washington to Maumee River in 1794. It was another supply depot fortification. Here's something interesting. Its exact location has not been officially recognized by the state. In 1998, archaeologists and local volunteers conducted an extensive search of a site they believed may have been Fort Adams along the St. Mary's River in Mercer County. It was the smallest of the wood fortifications constructed during General Wayne's campaign. So nobody knows where that's at exactly. There might be some people. Some of those volunteers and the archaeologists, maybe they did find it. Of course, they don't want to talk about it, but you can bet that's something really interesting. Fort Defiance, I love the name. First saw service during the wars after the Battle of Fallen Timbers. Wayne used the fort as an operational center used to seek out and destroy Native American villages within a 50-mile radius of the fort. That's interesting. So, I think a lot of us, I did until I read that paragraph, thought, Battle of Fallen Timbers, they retreated, okay, there was signing of documents at Fort Greenville and it's done. No, he was still chasing Indians. They had to have camped. That they camped in a 50-mile radius of the fort. Think about that. Can you imagine 50 miles and not camping? There's no way. So I'm sure that there's campgrounds and stuff dotted all over Western Ohio. You there, Matt? Did you fall asleep?
Yeah, no. There has. I was talking, but my my mute button was on. No, yeah, absolutely. Once again, there's literally has to be hundreds of spots. That these soldiers and militiamen and Indians and all these guys were. They camped, they staged themselves, they prepared, they built forts, and there's got to be a ton of smaller stuff out there that's just not been really recognized, in the history books because they don't know. And that, I guess that above everything else, is super intriguing to me. And I wish I lived further west in Ohio. That'd be cool because there's got to be some really cool sites out there that if you just get in the right spots, and you're bound to find some really nice relics. I mean, they're there. I'd love to find a cannonball. That'd be really cool.
Right, from this. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Or, a handful of musket balls that you knew were from Matt Anthony Wayne's men. Wow. Here's another interesting fact about Fort Defiance. After the Treaty of Greenville, the Native Americans allowed for the fort to be converted into a trading post. Boy, that's seen a lot of action. When the War of 1812 broke out, Harrison repaired the fort so it could again become an active fortification while other forts were constructed nearby. You can about bet that they mustered there. Relics from the War of 1812 were lost there. You can just imagine that Fort Defiance seen a lot of activity all the way up into the War of 1812. That would be a really interesting place to come across. Do some research. Camp Deposit, constructed by General Wayne just before he engaged the enemy at what would be known as the Battle of Fallen Timbers. Wayne realized his enemy wasn't far off, and as he progressed up the Maumee River, he decided not to carry any more supplies than absolutely necessary. He had the men build a temporary fortification. They could deposit their supplies. The fortification was protected by a small group of men under the leadership of Captain Zebulon, Zebulon Pike. Interesting name. It's what I should have named Randy, Zebulon. Hey, Zebby!
You Zebulon.
Taking time to build it gave General Wayne a major advantage in his campaign against Americans. Against the Native Americans that were waiting less than 5 miles north of him along the Maumee River. The fortification meant that his men could go into battle without all their supplies. Their supplies were safe. And it also delayed the battle for like 2 days. The Indians didn't eat for over 24 hours and obviously would have had less energy to fight. I think that's really interesting. You know, I wonder if that was planned.
Yeah, I mean, it may just be pure coincidence, but if it was planned, it was a damn good idea.
Mm-hmm. Once the Battle of Fallen Timbers was over, Wayne's men destroyed nearby Native American villages and farmlands. They then returned to Camp Deposit, gathered their equipment and materials for their return trip to Greenville. There is no marker, but it is believed this temporary fortification was on the north side of the Maumee River, near just south of Waterville. That's interesting. Again, you know, they don't even know where it's at. I guarantee it.
There you are once again with, well, they think it was here, but, well, we're not really sure. So, you know, anyone out in some of these areas that, you know, has time to research and really start tracking this stuff down, they're going to end up finding some amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I hope, too, as I come back to visit Ohio, hopefully. Fort Miami's was a British fort. It was an earthwork fortification, and I think it's still, parts of it are still there. It was on the west side of the Maumee River and just south of Toledo. Designed and built by Royal Engineers, Fort Miami's consisted of 4 diamond-shaped earthen walls called bastions. The British dug a 24-foot deep trench around the fort and lined it with rows of stakes to slow an enemy's assault. There were 14 cannons in the fort. The fort was designed to defend the land and water routes to Detroit against American forces under Mad Anthony Wayne. After the battle, just south of this location, many of the Native Americans retreated to this position. I can't talk tonight, man. I just can't even do it. I'm struggling. For protection against Wayne and his men. They were refused into the fort by the British. The British didn't want to get into a conflict with the Americans. General Wayne, from there, sent men off to destroy local villages. The fort was later surrendered to the Americans, who occupied it until 1799. The site was abandoned. During the War of 1812, the British once again occupied this site until it was abandoned after the last siege of Fort Meigs in 1813. You know, it's interesting. I forget who was president during the War of 1812.
It was me.
It was you? I can't remember who it was. But, you know, when I was researching this, it surprised me this fort wasn't one of the first ones that, you know, they were worried about coming from Canada. The British were staging in Canada. And why wouldn't they occupied this fort like right away? You thought that had been at the top of the list.
It was James Madison, my friend.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But you know what's interesting to me about this is because I actually know where Fort Meigs is at. I've been up there, and that's it's right at the Maumee River. And you know, because I used to go up there walleye fishing. But when I went to the University of Toledo, I'd spend some time up there walleye fishing when the walleyes would run. But anyhow, I mean I never knew any of that until I had read through some of this, and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And I'm willing to bet, even right there in the river, there's so many areas along the river. Now, I don't know if you're allowed to detect any of that. I think it's I don't know if you are not, but when that water's down in the winter time, you can walk way out in them parts of the river right there, and I'd almost guarantee, well, minus the 800 lead weight you might find from people walleye fishing, but I almost guarantee you might come across something cool just right through there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Fort Piqua, located. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to keep. We got so much. We're getting there though. We're getting there. But we still got some to get through. Fort Piqua, located on the west bank of the Miami River north of Piqua, was a supply fortification built by Wayne in 1794. It was comprised of several buildings in a single blockhouse. One of the wagon masters, a 17-year-old Irish immigrant named John Johnston, had a layover at Fort Piqua while moving supplies north for General Wayne. Many years later, Mr. Johnston was appointed by President Thomas Jefferson as an Indian agent and stationed at Fort Wayne. In 1811, a new agency was set up in Piqua. Johnston, being familiar with the area, established a farm where the old Fort Piqua once stood. Today, Johnston Farm is a preserved historic site. Now, that's what you'll read in the history books. I've talked to people in the past. Now, this has been that they don't really know where Fort Piqua was. That it wasn't built on top of, or that the Johnston Farm wasn't built on top of it. I don't know. I really don't know enough about it, but there's a good possibility. I know that area is very, it's a protected site. You can't hunt there. It's a preserved historical site, but I've heard people say that that's not where it was. But I've also heard people say they don't know where it was. It wasn't there, but it hasn't been found. I can tell you, like 10 years ago, a couple different people were telling me they weren't sure where it was at. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know, but it's interesting. And again, I wouldn't be surprised at all if, it wasn't there. Now, I know that they've had some, archaeologists have had some detectorists there and stuff, but I don't recall anything ever being published, being found there. So, not saying that there isn't, but I've never seen anything published saying that there was. Fort Laramie, during the Indian Wars of 93 to 94, Anthony Wayne ordered construction of the fort. It was located at the between St. Mary's River and modern-day Laramie's Creek. And he initially intended for it to be a stockade, but after defeating a large group of Native Americans at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, he decided a blockhouse and several storage buildings were more important. When the War of 1812 erupted, the abandoned fort was once again occupied and defended as a supply depot. After the war, man, I am horrible tonight. What's wrong with me? Here's something interesting. After the war, the fort became a tavern.
That's cool.
That is cool.
That is cool.
Now, I don't know where that's at, or if I'm not sure what that's about. I don't know much about Fort Laramie. Do you know anything? Did you come across it?
No, I'm not. I honestly, that's one I didn't really research or look into. I'm not too familiar with that myself.
Okay. Fort St. Mary's, built by General Wayne during his campaign in the Maumee River in 94. The fort was a supply depot on the St. Mary's River. I've got kind of a story about this, and for the life of me, I can't remember who told me this. Somebody had told me that up near St. Mary's, they come across what they believed was a really old fort, and metal detected it. Found a lot of cool stuff. I thought I knew who had told me that story, and a couple years ago, I brought it up to him, and he said, no, that wasn't me. I have no clue what you're talking about. So I don't know who told me that, but I've wondered if they found Fort St. Mary's. I don't know. Maybe historians know where it's at. Maybe this was another fort, but they found this person definitely found a fort. I can't even remember what was found, but I did see some pictures. I was told what was found there and stuff, and very interesting, very cool. But whether it was Fort St. Mary's, I don't know, but I know they were definitely up there. This is kind of interesting. From my prior research years ago, okay, I had known of Fort Rowdy. That was in, that is now where Covington, Ohio is. And I believe it's where the park is now. I don't know if they allow metal detecting. I'm not sure. You'd have to talk to somebody. I'm sure if they do, it's been pounded, and it's not saying you couldn't find something. But Fort Rowdy, in my research, Fort Rowdy never came up. I found it because I knew about it, and you can look up Fort Rowdy. So what I'm getting at is, through my research, I didn't even come across Fort Rowdy, but yet it was used in 93. They built a stockade and a blockhouse. It was more of a transfer point, a holding place to keep supplies, but it was also to monitor the river. They didn't see any action, and early settlers used it for a gathering place. But although it was not, they didn't see any action, or stuff was stored there. Men were stationed there. Things had to have been lost. So I found that really interesting. What I'm getting at, there's stuff out there. There's forts that aren't real well known, and I am sure that there are forts that are not known. Bill said. Cool. Bill said, "What river was it located near, Mike? What are you referring to, Bill? I'm sorry. I've been looking at through all my notes and stuff. I haven't been in chat. I'm wrapping up what I have in notes. So if anybody has any questions, any comments, throw it in chat and we can discuss it." So I'm guessing he's asking about. The last fort I mentioned, I want to say, that would have been the Stillwater River. That's what it would have. Stillwater runs through like present-day West Milton, Covington. That was on the Stillwater River, which is pretty far east of most of what we're talking about, and that's what I'm getting at. I think that there was, there's a lot of things from the 1790s in the Ohio wilderness that you're not going to find in history books. And, you might find obscure stuff here and there, but a lot of it would be boots on the ground. He said he was thinking it was the Mad River. No, it was it's on the Stillwater. I'm almost positive it was on the Stillwater. Almost positive. I'd have to look real quick, but so I'm pretty much done. Is there anything you wanted to add, Matt, or talk about?
Yeah, I want to talk about you coming to Ohio, and we're going to take a trip western Ohio. We're going to do some research, and then we're going to go find cool stuff that is guaranteed, no doubt, sitting out there that people have no clue about at this point in time.
My brother has a really good friend that said he can get me on tons of land. We think Fort Recovery. We can't remember now where he was talking about. It's but we're both pretty sure that, because this was talked about like over a year ago, and the last time I was in Ohio, I knew it was going to be all family stuff, and I wanted to find stuff close to the house. But as poorly as we did, now looking back, I wish, I wish that that I would have. Bill, you might be right. That might be that should be the Stillwater. I'm almost positive that's the Stillwater. But no, I'm not sure. Should be the Stillwater. Covington, Ohio is straight north of like Inglewood. It's a little bit west of Troy, a little bit northwest of Troy, Ohio. But yeah, that's pretty far over. Like if you look where Greenville's at, let me just do a quick, because everything was kind of along in that line with Greenville. I mean, you're talking 14 miles east of Greenville. That's a pretty significant path, and then you got Piqua, which is still east of Covington. So stuff came up a little bit farther east. Okay, now that I know Fort Piqua, it makes sense. The town that I'm talking about, Piqua, Miami River runs through Piqua, and the town that I'm talking about, where supposedly he camped, and early settlers come in and built there because the land had been cleared. A lot of the land had been cleared. Is right along the Miami River, just south of Piqua. So that makes sense. So, I mean, if you scroll out, you go out and you look. I mean, we're talking a pretty wide path, and all the way on the west side of Ohio, a big path going up west. I mean, they covered a lot of ground and dotted a lot of the land with forts and camps and stuff like that. So, yeah, Stillwater. Yeah, good deal. What else, Matt? What else you got, buddy? You got anything else?
No, I just want to say that I was inspired by the podcast with George the other week, talking about, I had been looking at that XPORX, and I was wondering, from what I read, I was looking for a definitive answer. Is it a scaled down, knockdown version of the Deus, or is it its own animal? And after listening to what George had to say, I ordered one.
Right, and what else did you order right before that?
Oh, and then I decided I definitely needed the Equinox 800.
Right.
And I'm going to put, I still have my preconceived notions and theories about that machine and about reasons people are dumping what I would consider a way better machine. But shy of having one, testing it, and giving it an honest, fair review, I don't want to pass those judgments to other people. So I did buy one because I want to make my opinions based on facts and not just what I would assume. And so hopefully, and then I was hoping to get that machine out Saturday, and unfortunately we hit a spot that, I mean, it was like I could just hear crickets chirping in the field. I mean, there was really not much of anything there. I mean, so I didn't end up even getting that out, but I got some spots. Hopefully sometime soon I can get to that I can see what that machine's capable of, because there's spots that I've not only hit pretty good, but and I know, where everything kind of, how it sits and is laid out in the ground in some of those areas. So I'll be able to really put that to the test and see, is it the miracle machine that people keep talking about, or is it a machine that's a good machine, but because of it being lighter than some other stuff and maybe slightly faster, people are willing to forego some more advanced features or some other options that other detectors have. So, I don't know. I'm going to make my judgments based on fact and not just me thinking one thing or another. So, I did buy that, and I'm still on the lookout. I think I need after watching that Amphibio do some damage down in Civil War relic hunting with Brian. Man, that thing was a machine, man. That thing just killed it, and just pulling stuff out of depths. Now, granted, going over all that stuff with the Rudis, absolutely, I could hear every one of them signals clear as day. So I chalk that up to maybe I wasn't getting over top of some of the stuff. I'm not exactly sure. Or that Brian has significantly more time and years of Civil War relic hunting than I do. And, I'm not sure, but every signal that he was finding, some of them things were down there. I mean, they were deep. And I'd go over it with the Rudis, and it sounded fantastic. Like, if I had went over that, I would have dug it. But so, my performance compared to his was quite poor, but that Amphibio is waterproof, and it definitely proved to me that it's a machine that can recover stuff deep.
Let me comment on a few things here. First off, I think you and I both have been a little bit negative on the 800, and I guess we have trouble wrapping our mind around it. But at the same time, I feel like there has to be something about it because there's so many people that love it. And you're right, Bill's right. He said we can talk all day, but swing time will tell us the most. And I'm really curious to see what you think about the 800. Now, is that going to be your first? Is that what you're going to try to get to first?
I still almost would rather get to running the Rudis first, but
you got some more Rudis. You've ran a Rudis some, but I mean,
but before the ORX, yes, I'm gonna test the 800 before I get to playing with the ORX.
I know. Okay, something else I wanted to tell you. I'm glad you brought up the Rudis. Something I want to tell people, because we don't, here in the United States, we don't have a lot of Rudis users. I just seen a thread on Facebook. A guy was saying every time he ground balances Rudis, he gets like 2 or 3 exclamation points. And he was really concerned about this. And he said where it ground balanced out. And some people were commenting they were having the same issue and this and that. I think you need to understand you can't read too much into that. He's getting that because Viola, which is Eric's wife, who is also very knowledgeable on metal detectors, and what she doesn't know, she will talk to Eric about and get the correct response, which is one of the things I love about them. And she said, no worries. That's where the part of England you're talking about, that's where it'll ground balance out, and you're going to get those exclamation points. And what I'm gathering from all of this, I mean, the guy even said he's finding great stuff, he's getting great depth, but he's concerned when he ground balances and he gets the exclamation points. That's where you and I are kind of different. Because I get
me into panic mode.
I get exclamation points, and I don't care because I'm going to go hunt, and it's running stable. I'm getting good depth. I don't care what it said. But what I think more of what that's telling you is what kind of ground you're in, and it's okay to have exclamation points. It just means you're in. I think what it's saying with the exclamation points is this: hey, you might want to try to ground balance this now. You might have been over iron or something. And then if you keep ground balance, you're in clean ground, roll with it. It's not hurting the detector. It's saying, hey, you're in pretty heavy mineralized ground here. Yeah, that's all it's doing.
And definitely looking back at that from, the 2 weeks ago or whatever that was now, once again, I didn't have problems finding deep targets once. If someone else went over and found it and said, hey, come check this, I'd go over it, found it, no problem, would have dug it, no problem. I just think a lot of it, at that point, I was switching through so many different things and trying so much different stuff, and I was just like, I was in a state of like clearly I should have just let the whole ground balance thing go because obviously it didn't matter. It was still functioning perfectly fine, but that just was resonating in my head, and man, it really threw me. It really did.
You were in Virginia, and you weren't going to get that thing to come back and say, okay, because you were in heavily mineralized ground. Yeah. And I'm going to say something. I know we joke a lot, and I don't mean this joking, and I don't mean it rude or to put you down. I mean, you are a heck of a detectorist. I mean, bottom line, no matter what we joke about, I value your opinion. If you say this or that, I believe you, and I take your word for it because I've hunted with you. I think but something I've noticed hunting with you, I feel like, and I'll have to explain this a little more. Like, you get really stressed out and nervous really quick. And I think I don't know what that is. I mean, in no way do I feel like it's like Matt's got to find everything. I mean, Matt's the kind of guy that he'd give you everything out of his pocket. It's not about, I got to find all the treasure, but I do see you get really flustered when we're detecting.
Yeah.
And I think you get really, I think that day it threw you way off that you were getting the exclamation points and you're hunting with Brian. And I think that was a lot more of you just being really flustered.
I guarantee my poor performance, 90% of it was me being flustered and not just sitting back, not just relaxing and saying, okay, I know that I can't ground balance exactly to what the machine considers acceptable, but I'm still pulling. I can still find deep targets with this machine. It's clearly hitting them, and just relax and see. I got myself worked up to a point that, at that point, like it was just downhill for me from there. I mean, I literally spent so much time trying to figure out if there was anything I could do to get that to ground balance where the machine said, "Hey, this is ground balanced properly." Then I should have just ignored. Once again, it didn't even matter because I was still able to go over targets that were super deep, and it was finding them, no problem. But I had myself at a point that I wasn't willing to let that go, and really, I think that really tanked a lot of my performance that day. And it's unfortunate, but once again, it's a learning experience for me too in some of these areas where I'm not used to hunting, and things I just have to. I sometimes sweat the small stuff, which really doesn't matter. And, I don't know. I guess for me, with
the Rudis, you just need to ground balance it. If you get a bunch of exclamation points, make sure you're in clean ground. Find another, and if you get them again, go. It's not hurting the detector.
I will say that I was using the Rudis this past. I don't know if it was past Friday. In a farmhouse that we stopped and got permission on, and no, we didn't really find much of anything there. However, I came across a signal in the backyard that sounded. I mean, I knew it was deep, but I'm like, I got to know what that is. I don't think it's anything amazing. I don't think it's really a coin, but I got to know what it is. And I start digging, and I ended up the Profine 35 pinpointer, two of those full down into the hole. I bet that thing's around 8 inches. I was almost basically 16 inches down. At this point, I was invested, so I'm like, I got to know what this is, thinking it's like a giant lid. It was a small button, smaller than the size of a dime, and that machine picked that thing up out of there. I don't know how, but, I mean, once again, I heard it clear as day, and I'm like, man, it sounds deep, sounds probably 10 inches or whatever, but, yeah, I would have never in a million years. Now, I did have the big 15-inch coil on there, but holy moly.
Yeah, that Rudis is at
that point, I was running, at that point, too, I will say I was running in the deep coin mode, which is basically kind of a mix between an all-metal non-motion mode and a threshold mode. So, but yeah, I pulled that out and I was like, there's no way that's what was down here. And I scanned that hole a million times every direction. That was the only thing down there.
Yeah. Yeah. That detector is incredible. And I'm really curious, I hope in the end we can do an honest, good, I mean, of course we're going to keep it honest. Yeah. I want to do the Rudis versus the 800 versus the ORX. And,
I'd like to see
what I suspect will come about is you're going to see places and situations where one excels a little bit over the other, but
one excels.
I think they're great detectors. And, I want to make the point, to get one over here, a Rudis is, I think, just under $800. Both of the other are $900. And I'm telling you, there's no doubt in my mind this Rudis will hang with those. I'm not saying it's going to be better or anything like that. I think they're all great. But that Rudis, just every time I go out, it impresses me a little bit more. It is a heck of a detector. But enough about that. I mean, I know people get tired, but I'm really looking forward to.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of work to do, testing out some different stuff. But once again, I can't sit back and pass judgments on a machine that I haven't personally tried out and used.
Me and Matt. You know, if you listen to the show, Matt and I, you know, Matt has you haven't been. I mean, you haven't trashed it. I don't mean that, but
I haven't trashed it. But from day one when it came out,
you haven't been impressed.
Wanted
you
it
haven't
to fail. I'll be honest, and which is shocking because I love my 3030. I like MindLab. I'm a big MindLab guy, but I wanted that to fail, and it hasn't. So, you know, for me, that means that machine must be a lot better than I thought, and I need to get my hands on it, need to test it, and, you know, draw my own conclusions instead of just, you know, hoping or you know, reading what people say and taking it for the gospel. So, you know, did I need another machine? No, but is that something that, you know, I myself would feel a lot better testing? Absolutely.
Yeah, we did a show one night, and we got off the show, and I called Matt up and I said, "Man, why are you? I'm surprised of how you are with 800. You know how you don't seem interested, and you kind of because Matt is a MindLab guy, and it just really surprised me. And so you know, I hope you keep an open mind, and I know you will, and get out and use it and see what you think. And you know, I hope down the road we can do some comparisons between all three of them. I think they're all three really hot detectors, and I'm really curious what the outcome.
And it's very likely too, Mike, that what I might see after all said and done is that for that price range of that machine versus what the 3030 offers, it's every bit worth the money. You know, that's probably what I'm going to end up determining. But once again, I don't like to. You know, I may judge some stuff here on the surface of things, but I wouldn't truly put out a review or anything else on anything unless I physically did the work
absolutely
to test it. So, you know, in my testing from the 3030, or excuse me, from the Rudis in my side yard, it blew my mind what that machine could do. Now, as of, you know, a few different places I've used it now, I've seen the depth that thing definitely is capable of pulling stuff from. So, you know, but until I get full detailed tests, you know, I'm not going to say once again it's the best machine ever, but it's a damn good machine from what I can see already. You know, for what that cost, it's got tons of features, and it definitely seems to be well worth the money. So, you know, but obviously further testing. But I would like, you know, and George was saying, you know, he wasn't willing to necessarily compare certain machines up against each other because he says they're different machines. I get what he's saying, and I get that direction he was headed with that. But by the same token, but if you take a machine, you know, that is in the same price range, you should be able to compare them, you know, relative to what
absolutely.
what it is.
I mean, you can't compare a PI versus a VLF or you know,
I mean,
stuff like that, or a water detector compared to you know, something that's I get that, but I agree. I thought they deserved a comparison. Myself, they're in the same price range. They're meant to go after the same things. So, but I'm really interested in what's happening. Hurry up with the Rudis. I need my coils. I need my coils, man.
Well, you better come up to Ohio because no, you know, I wish I was trying to get out another place over the weekend, and I was with Tim and Roy, and unfortunately we just ran out of time as we were investigating some other spots that we stopped at, and I would have loved to have had the opportunity last weekend to run that 15-inch coil on a spot that I have hit pretty good, but I know that there's some, and the super small coil, because I guarantee that Rudis is going to pick stuff out of there that's being masked by a ton of iron on the one area. In the other area, I think there's stuff that's super deep that just may be being missed because for the site that was there, we did pull some stuff, but unfortunately, being that nothing's ever really been touched with that property other than farmed, it didn't seem to have as wide of a spread area. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff that could just be really deep out at that spot. So I'm not sure, but nevertheless, the only way to find out is to take the machines out, dig, test, and draw conclusions based on that.
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll see what happens, and but yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing where this progresses. If you get a chance, check out Gypsy Jules on YouTube. She's also has a Facebook page, Girls Rock Metal Detecting, YouTube. That's Siren Kimmy. She does our intro. Thank you so much, Siren Kimmy. Ohio Relic Hunting on Facebook. That's one of my favorites. Of course, I'm an Ohio guy. Dirt Pirates on Facebook. Man, I'm losing my voice. I talk too much tonight. On Facebook. Again, Dirt Pirates. Another one I like to watch. This one's in the UK. Huntress Kimmy and Cloudhopper Scott. Those two are great. Kimmy just recently got a multi-cruiser. Scott's got a multi-cruiser. They find great stuff, but what is so funny, why I love these guys, is Kimmy kicks his butt consistently. And the looks on, like, Scott will have that look like, oh, I'm so happy for you, but you can tell he just wants to kill her because she rubs it in. She is feisty, man. I like Kimmy and Scott a lot. I talk to them. I've had them on the UK podcast. They're really good, fun people. Really passionate about metal detecting. So there you go. Next week, I am not sure what we have going on yet. I haven't determined. If we don't have a guest Monday night, I do know we're going to talk about, let me pull it up here real quick, because not only am I losing my voice, I'm losing my mind a little bit. It's kind of turned into mush. But really two interesting stories I came across is lost treasure of the Little Bighorn. And there's actually a couple stories around that. There's actually two really interesting treasure stories that, through my research, I feel like there could definitely be some merit to both of them that I'm really interested to talk about. So that's our plan next Monday night. If we don't have a guest, tune in 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anything else you can think of, Matt?
No, I'm just glad that I corrected myself earlier with the taxidermy instead of saying tannery.
Something else I wanted to say. Let me see if I can remember. After we did the show with George, there were a few things he pointed out he misspoke on. And I want to say, one of them was he was calling the programs on the ORX coin and relic, and I think they just say coin. There were a few things, and I'm like, George, we all misspeak. It's not a big deal. People understand. But I mean, he realized it right away. He contacted me that night, and then we talked about it the next day. But no big deal. I mean, it wasn't anything major, but he did misspeak on that. So let's wrap it up, man. I'm losing my throat's all scratchy now, and I am my brain's mush. But I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun researching this and learning about this, and I'm going to continue with this. And I'd like to get hunting some of it. I really would. I think it'd be really interesting. I suspect there's a lot of relics out there yet to be found. A lot of great relics and stuff.
No doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, we really appreciate you tuning in and listening. Ken, I'm going to stay on Matt so we can get some shirts made up. I'm really looking forward to that.
By this weekend, I will send you a design.
Yep, absolutely. And appreciate everybody tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night. Have a good week as well.
You guys.